What happens when devastation strikes? Does it become a defining moment in your life, or does it awaken something within you that you never really knew existed? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee Conversations of Friends of Faith to Encourage and Equip. I'm Kim Crabill, always delighted to be your host. Today, we hear the incredible story of Mario DeMatteo, a man whose life was forever changed by a tragic accident at a young age. Mario transformed his suffering into a powerful testimony of faith, using it as an anchor to dedicate his life to serving others and helping families lead their children to a life of faith in Christ. He has become a renowned comic book creator. He is an amazing farmer and a great storyteller. Through it all, Mario has found his unique way to bless children and to glorify God's kingdom through his experience. Friends, you are about to be inspired beyond anything you could ever imagine as you meet and hear the words of this remarkable man. It is my honor to bring onto the coffee show Mario DeMatteo. Hey, Mario.
Hello, Kim. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's so good to see you again. We met in California when I was filming out there, probably what, 6 or 7 years ago, I guess.
Well, yeah, it was during COVID, so it wouldn't have been that long. Maybe 3 years ago. I
It
remember it
was.
was right.
Oh, was it then? I
Yep.
guess. My goodness. Oh well, it seems like we've known each other much longer. So
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for joining us. And you do have such an inspiring story. You're doing such incredible things with your life, Mario. But let's start with giving our new audience a little bit of background. When you were 20 years old, you had a diving accident. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. I was 20 years old. I was playing soccer at a school called Point Loma Nazarene University in San Diego. I thought I had my whole life figured out. I was very lucky to have known Jesus and was had been saved in high school, but at that point in my life I wasn't really following Jesus, and I was on a wayward path, to say the least. And on a summer vacation to Costa Rica, I dove into a shallow swimming pool on the last day of the trip and I drowned, and I hit my head on the bottom and I broke my neck, and I was sinking to the bottom and saw my whole life just disintegrating, and I passed out, and my friend luckily pulled me out. And one of many miracles, he had just learned CPR 2 weeks before, and he was the only one at the pool that knew CPR, and he brought me back to life. And I woke up a few hours later in the emergency room at a Costa Rican hospital, and a young nurse was holding my hand and she was praying for me in Spanish. And it almost felt like a surreal dream, but I knew at that point that my life was never going to be the same. But I also felt a strange and comforting reassurance that God was there beside me and that there was still purpose for my life. So it was the beginning of a whole new life, to say the least.
Absolutely. Did you know then? How long was it before you knew that you would never walk again?
I had a pretty strong suspicion because my even at that point my hands were barely working, my arms were not working, and it was I was paralyzed at that point, so I knew that I was paralyzed, but there was maybe hope that it would come back with surgery. Or And we came back to America on a Lear jet, an emergency Lear jet, and did surgery. And then I woke up again in the hospital at UCSD, and um, I was still paralyzed. So I was like, oh, I don't know. There was still hope. The doctor kept saying there might be a chance, but I think I already knew at that point.
Mm. Tell us, going through this, I mean, there has to be some really dark, dark times and moments, but you talk about how God began to reveal himself to you through this suffering. Can you explain to us what that means? Because boy, God really had to step in. That had to be a really traumatizing time.
That definitely it was, really scary. I was in the hospital at UCSD for almost 6 months recovering and trying to during that time, trying to understand what was in store, what God had in store, and a lot of really amazing people, friends and parents of friends would come into the hospital and visit me, and my one friend's mom brought me a Bible, and I started reading that. I was alone in the hospital most of the day, and then my parents and friends would come at night, and there was a lot of soul searching, and it was, just so many little things. I was given a book by a man named Viktor Frankl. He was a World War II Jewish he was in a concentration camp, and he he was a psychologist, and while he was in the camp, he was studying basically the people that were with him, the fellow prisoners, how they were dealing with their suffering. And he discovered that if you could find purpose in your suffering, that it would be easier for you to go through it. And that became a really big anchor for me to try to discover what God had in store. And through a lot of
Mhm.
prayer and friends and reading the Bible and just being alone, I knew really early on that life wasn't over and that there was hope was going to come out at the end of this tunnel, and it has for sure.
Absolutely. Well, tell us how that process began. I mean, so you were in the hospital for about 6 months, you said, and then obviously you went home. What began to happen? Because obviously, I see you moving your arms, and I know the things that you do now. So, tell us about some of that recovery stage.
Yes, I was very lucky to be in a town called Carlsbad where I grew up, and there was a rehabilitation center just for spinal cord injury people just down the street from me, as this kind of the state of the art place, and it allowed me to be around a lot of other people in wheelchairs, and that gave me a lot of just mental hope. My arms came back relatively early. My hands still don't work super well, but I have some movement in my hands. But I've learned how to write. One little glimmer of in the hospital where God revealed Himself. I was able to put a pen in my hand and start writing the alphabet, and I started crying and saying, "Well, at least I could still write and tell stories." And that was a huge moment for me just in the hospital room. But in the rehabilitation, just getting my strength back and being able to live my life and learning how to live in a wheelchair and being around other people in wheelchairs was really inspirational to see that other people are doing it and they're not giving up on life. I met a little 5-year-old boy who had been in a wheelchair since he was 1 years old. He got ran over by a car in a parking lot on accident, and he was just all smiles and laughter. And I would be working out right beside him, and that became another just point of inspiration where I saw God shining through this little boy's face. And now that boy's making movies in Hollywood. So that was
Oh,
20 years ago.
oh my goodness. Uh, your story is just it's just so full of hope, Mario. Let me ask you this question. And I know and I don't like to ask questions like this, but I think it's so important to ask questions like this. Um, it goes against my nature, but because I we always like to share the hope and the good, and there's so much hope and so much good. But I need you to tell my audience, I need you to tell us when you hit some of your darkest moments, because we have a lot of people right now that are in dark, dark times. And they're not paralyzed physically, but they may be paralyzed spiritually or emotionally. You know, their marriages have broken up, their kids are something has happened. You know, I was at a funeral of a 3-year-old little girl recently, and her parents are in this pain and they are threatening to take their lives. You know, there's just so much pain and hurt right now. I need you to explain to us when you were at some of your darkest moments, how did you pull yourself out of that? What did you do? Give us something practical that we can hold on to.
Yeah, Life in a wheelchair is definitely a roller coaster ride, every of emotions and just physically the pain of being in a wheelchair. I still deal with physical pain and mental pain all the time. I talk about hope a lot, but I fully understand what people are going through, especially since COVID. It seems like it just
Mm,
ripped a hole in
yes.
the heart of the world, and I do sympathize so much with people that are going through suffering. One thing I like to hold on to is that God is beside us and he's walking beside us in the suffering, and that
Mm,
he too suffered. And I feel that if we're able to just hold on to just a glimmer of hope, it can just turn into a massive kind of superpower in our lives. And that's easier said than done. One thing I know, and a lot of people aren't as lucky as me to have the community of friends and family that I have. I really encourage people to join community and to be in community, even if they're not naturally inclined to. If the depression or the sadness is just weighing on them so hard, if
mm,
they can just muster enough strength to go to church or to join a group, a poetry group, that was something that became big for me. Writing and being around other people is we're meant to be around and in community, and
yeah.
without it, that the devil can just get his foothold and just make us feel like nothing and just whisper in our ears and our hearts that it would be better to not be alive. But I just like to encourage people that there's so much more to give, and your suffering, if you can figure out the purpose of that suffering. And that again is such a almost cliche, because when you're in the darkness, it's hard to see the light. But
Mhm,
just rest assured, God is suffering with you, and he understands what you're going through, and he will come when we call upon him, and if we hold on to his hand, he can lead us through the darkness.
mm. That's beautiful, Mario. You are just a hero to me and so many people. I just respect you so much for what you've done, because you in the midst of all this, you have done incredible things. The book that I'm holding right now, that is going to be on screen, The Hiding Place, a graphic novel. This is following some other work that you've done. Tell us about how you began this your work as a book creator, comic book creator. Tell us, this is so fascinating. Our audience are going to love this. We're going to be putting up the other books that you've done, but tell us how this came about, because this is miraculous.
Thank you. It is miraculous. I would have never bet in a million years that I would be making these books before my accident. Early on, I became fascinated with comic books and graphic novels. I was in my home a lot. I didn't know how to drive yet, and I was just kind of trapped in my house. My parents were working. I'm 20 years old in a wheelchair, and comic books came into my life just as a gift from God, to 100% gift. And I got a book called Silver Surfer and started reading it, and saw that there was more to comics than just these fighting and battles and um, adventures, but there was a real heart and soul to these books, and lessons to be learned. And fast forward many years, I was in college, went back to college and wanted to learn how to write stories, and graphic novels now had become a huge part of my life, and I felt called to learning how to write them. And at one point, I was working on a book that still hasn't come out yet, but I had this vision of Paul the Apostle um, riding on a Mad Max Star Wars vehicle, hunting down Christians in Damascus. He was Saul at that point, and that vision just wouldn't leave me. And I thought, what if I could make a Star Wars like version of the New Testament for kids that might be reluctant readers, or might not like the Bible, or understand it, or even kids that do go to church and love the Bible. This would just be another way to get them to understand and remember the stories in a visually compelling way. And I was also studying just from the perspective of the educational value of comic books for kids. I loved the books, but kids, they're such a amazing tool to get kids to learn and to read. There's so much actual words in a comic book that you don't realize where they're almost tricked into reading. And there's a triumph after reading a comic book. They are easier than reading a full novel. So you read that last page and you just read this hardcover book. So there was so much that was drawing me toward them. And I was able to get some really amazing mentors, and the doors just kept opening on guiding me toward how to make these books. And those first two books, we made Peter the Apostle and Paul the Apostle with a publishing company called Broad Street Publishing. And they really have been behind us on these projects. And they've become a really great tool and ministry tool for a lot of families. And we continue to get amazing responses from churches and families on those books. And they were kind of the stepping stone to The Hiding Place, which is kind of, in my opinion, the most important work that my company has made so far, which is adapting the famous and amazing story of Corrie ten Boom, her Holocaust surviving memoir of how she saved thousands of Jewish families during the Holocaust. They were hiding Jewish families and other Dutch kids that were getting sucked into the war machine of the Nazis, and they were hiding them in their clock shop and smuggling them out of Holland. And she was just doing this with bravery and love and hope, and without, even in her dark moments, she just held on to the Lord,
Yeah.
which that this whole book is about, just holding on to God. There's a verse that I keep on my desk. It's Psalm 91, chapter 91, verse 1. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And Corey often talks about just having the wings of the Lord wrapped around her in that darkness. So we were so lucky to be called upon by Chosen Books, a publishing arm of Baker Publishing, and some really amazing champions over there, David Sluka and Jane Campbell. They hired us and believed in us, and it took us 2.5 years during COVID to make this book. But me and my business partner Ishmael Castro worked on it without ceasing, and were able to make this amazing book for kids and families.
It definitely is. David Sluka was working with Broad Street. They're also my publisher, so maybe that's another way that we met. But
Yes.
but yes, and I remember when I interviewed you the first time with uh, Paul and Peter, you had just contracted to do this, and I
Yes.
remember you saying, "Well, this is going to be the greatest thing, the hardest and the greatest thing I'll probably ever do." I will tell you, for moms and grandmoms out there, get these books for your kids, because here's the thing. I remember, you know, sometimes kids don't like to read. And so one of the ways that we can get them to read is to comic books, magazines. They don't even understand the concept that they are reading. They're just having a good time with the comic books. And so it is multi-layered. Not only are they learning to read, they're reading the gospel, they're reading from the word of God. They're getting the good stories of true heroes, and they're magnificent. And the other books are what, 8 by 10, or they're much larger. I've given several of them away, and now that my grandchildren are older, there a few of them I want to get some more. I would suggest everybody get them, and we'll be putting across the screen how to get those.
Thank
But
you.
The Hiding Place, how long did it take you to do this? This is magnificent. I don't even know how you do this. It's a work of art, and of course, we'll be showing it uh, on the screen where you just see the book. But Mario, how do you do this? How long did it take you?
Yeah, it took took over 2.5 years. And when we first signed the documents, I was super excited. And then it came time to start writing the script. So we take the book, The Hiding Place, the original work of Corrie ten Boom. And if you ever look at a Hiding Place book, it will always say with John and Elizabeth Sherrill. And they were the ones that actually helped Corey write the original book, The Hiding Place. And so anytime the book is published, their names are on the book. And we
Oh,
were really, really honored and blessed to work with Elizabeth Sherrill on this book before she went to heaven to meet her father. And so it was a huge blessing to work with her. But just to start, I remember starting to, you're adapting the story almost like a film script. So you're having to cut some stuff out, but we kept every major important moment almost to the T. We actually used most of the book is the original words from the book. We were able to take her all the dialogue and a lot of the amazing writing.
mhm.
And in that first couple months, I remember I would come out from my office and I'd be working for hours, and I would come out and tell my wife, "Oh my, I got myself in trouble on this one because I'm only on page 5 because it was so hard to condense this amazing story into something that could be digested for kids, but still hold true to the story and still hold the powerful messages and the tropes of it." So it was and so you start with the script, and then my partner Ishmael Castro is alongside me. He's starting to storyboard and sketch the project in a comic book form, and then we're developing the characters. And I a lot of things went wrong on this project. You hope that nothing goes wrong, but almost everything it felt like was going wrong. We had developed the character. It got approved by the publisher, and then Elizabeth wasn't initially happy with it. So just working with Elizabeth, she was very, very adamant that the character looked as much like Corey as possible, which we wanted to honor, of course. But
Right.
we also wanted to appeal to younger kids. So we wanted her to still look youthful and
Mhm.
because Corey was almost, I think, in her 40s when she went through this whole ordeal, mid to late 40s. And so then we developed a character, and we got very far on drawing the book, and then I presented it to a friend of mine, this older lady who loved Corey Ten Boom, and we were in this lunch meeting, and I showed her the book, and she said, "Well, who's this boy on the cover?" I said, "That's Corey." And she just went, "No, that can't be Corey." And she was like visually upset by how she looked, and it actually like transformed the way I looked at her. And I said, "Wow, she doesn't look what I want her to look like." So we went back to the drawing board and almost had to draw hundreds of drawings all over again, and finally came up with the Corey that you see on the cover that we're so pleased with, that we
Yes.
went through that struggle and journey. Um, and then just the research of holding true to the time period, making sure the uniforms and the the camps, the even Ravensbrück, the camp she was in, we were
Mhm.
using historical documents to make sure everything was as accurate as possible. And there's all sorts of beautiful little Easter eggs in there, visual Easter eggs when they enter into the Ravensbrück camp. we
Mhm.
we had, and this was probably didn't happen, but we had ravens flying overhead as they're entering into the camp, and it just made this ominous feel to it. There's a scene where Corey talks about she's being led out in front of these Nazi guards, and they're naked and they just feel ashamed and terrified. And she looks at her sister Betsy, who's such an important part of the book too,
Mhm.
almost equally the star of the book. And she says, Jesus was naked too. I forget that Jesus was naked when he got let out. And then they both just thank Jesus. And
Oh,
we actually at that point put Jesus in there being let out in front of Nazi guards. So it is a really amazing visual metaphor of them visualizing Jesus walking with them in this terrifying place.
oh, yeah. It's absolutely incredible, and you can almost look at the pictures if you know the story. I mean, you can look at the pictures. The graphic design is so good. You could look at the pictures and see the story, which I think is such a incredible feat for you to have arrived at. If you can look at something and see and it be so profound that you know what it's saying to you, that's incredible. And that you were able to do, Mario. It is astonishing. So everything that you had to fight through to get this done, boy, I mean, it's a classic. It'll be forever now. I mean, it will be on the shelves forever. You have put something out there that will never go away. It will always be something that parents and grandparents will want their kids to have. How, and I think,
Thank you.
when I did our intro, what happens when devastation strikes? Does it become a defining moment in your life, or does it awaken something within you that you never knew existed? You can't, you never know, but you wonder, don't you? If that accident had never happened, would you have had the time, the silence, the stillness, um, to do this incredible work that you're putting out into the world now?
Yeah, definitely not. And I want to just reiterate that on the art, Ishmael Castro is the artist on this project, and the amount of labor it took him, I think he probably is still dealing with the early stages of carpal tunnel, because this was, and that's not a joke. He hand drew this project. This is all by hand, and then it's brought into a computer, and then he hand colors it. There were some other artists that helped us with the lettering. Mark Harmon, who worked on my other project with me, and another team out of India helped with some of the coloring. But Ishmael is, I mean, I'm astonished when I look at the book that we accomplished it, because it looks so amazing. I was alongside him art directing the project, and we were just
Right.
this team that just didn't give up. But yeah, there would be no way I would have made these books if I hadn't gotten hurt. I was destined to be selling Monster Energy drinks. To be honest, that was my dream in life, to rise up in the ranks of Monster Energy. That's where my dad was working, and I already had a small job there in the marketing department, giving out free Monster Energy drinks to college kids. So that's where I was headed. I don't see how I could have ended up on this path without the tragedy that I went through. And I'm really thankful to the Lord that and this, sometimes people don't believe me, but I'm thankful for my injury, because I really believe I would have died or been in a really, really dark place if I hadn't been hurt. I was headed toward my own destruction. There's an image I often see in my head of ants, and they often will be headed towards something, but a lot of them will be scattered off and be off the path, and they're easily distracted. And I was headed way off the path, and I feel like when you have ants, you can put your hand down, and they'll kind of hit the hand, and they'll be guided back toward the path. And I feel like that's what God did to me. I'm thankful I didn't die, because I was very close to dying. And even times before that, I was living a reckless life, and I feel like the Lord gave me a second chance.
Wow. And the second chance has blessed all of us, and and the writing, the pictures, I looked through the book as I've read through it, just the way you adapt it to the time, and letting us see where we are the next morning, or the birthday, or all the different things that you've done. Just it's extraordinary. It's just an extraordinary piece of work. And I've written a few books. I can never touch anything like this. This is extraordinary, taking something like The Hiding Place and being able to redirect it to a children's comic book is amazing. And you know what? And I know you've probably heard this before. Um, I think about our timeline, and I do this visual sometimes, and it's a dot. We start with a dot, and I take toilet paper and I roll toilet paper as far as you can see it, and you just around the house, and it's like, our life is like that dot, and those rolls and rolls of toilet paper that never end, or that's eternity. It never ends. And all of us, with whatever we're going through here, we to remember that it's so temporary. And when Jesus calls us home, there'll be no wheelchairs, there'll be no depression, there'll be none of this that we're all dealing with now. So it's whatever we do now, that really matters in whatever situation we're in. And Mario, you are truly just a hero, and I just thank you so much for joining us today. We've got about a minute left. We have to talk about the gardening. The gardening. I want you to teach me how to garden the way you do. It's just a second love of yours, isn't it?
Yeah, so blessed to be gardening and growing food and falling in love with growing food and teaching other people how to grow food. I'm involved in another business where we're starting a blueberry farm in the town that I live in, where families can come and pick blueberries and pet farm animals and just be in the majesty of God's creation. That's called the Bonsall Berry Farm. And we're also growing food for families in need on part of the property. And we started a ministry called the Agrarian Institute that is just an amazing opportunity to bless the community and help families in need. All of our food that we grow in that ministry gets donated to another ministry called Operation Hope, which is a women's shelter that helps women that are going through really tough times get back on their feet. And so I love growing food. I believe it's part of our earliest human calling in the garden to tend to
Yes.
the Garden of Eden. So we're just really so blessed to be able to partake in that and um, just see the really, you honestly see the fruits of your labor. What you put in, you're able to taste it, and it's all organic. And we're just really so blessed to be in the creation care. That's kind of the word that the Christian community uses to take care of God's earth, that we're stewards of the earth and we're all called to it, but not everyone accepts the calling. And that's one of my other missions in life, is to just inspire people to get their hands out in the dirt and not give up on it, because it is a little hard. But I feel like in our DNA we're all green thumbs, and I don't believe there's anyone that's, when they say I'm not a green thumb, we all have it in us to grow a tomato or a pepper or a piece of lettuce.
Oh, Mario, my husband tells me that when I buy a plant, it's like putting a plant on death row. So I need help. Wouldn't it be fun to come out there and do a show live from your garden, your gardening?
Oh, that would be amazing. We would love to have you out there.
I think we could do that. I'm gonna start working on that. That would be so much fun.
That would be
Maybe
amazing.
spring. Let's work toward that. Mario, thank you so much for joining us. It was so great. I want to tell our audience, I always ask my guests, like, what is the one message that you want to leave? What is the message you want to be remembered? And I want to read this. It's so inspiring. The one message that Mario says that he wants everyone to remember is that God loves us and he has a beautiful plan for each of us. And every one of us, if we are willing to follow him, it can be greater than we could ever imagine. Mario, you are such an inspiration. I am going to work on coming to California to do a show because I need to find my green thumb.
That's awesome, Kim.
Thank
And
you so much, audience. You can look at the bottom of you're going to see the books. You're going to see how to order the books. Please order these for Christmas. It's great, or for any holiday, and get on the website and learn more about Mario. Mario, thank you so much.
thank you, Kim. Have a wonderful day, and thanks
Thank
for your audience.
Absolutely. Bye. Friends, thank you so much for joining us again. Like I said, look on the website. Please order that. You will never, ever regret this. And they're just wonderful. And I'm certainly going to be ordering several of them for all of my friends. So thank you to Mario for joining us all the way from California. And friends, what a conversation we've started here today. Please go out, spread the hope. People all around you need it. Look forward to seeing you next time right here on Coffee. Bye, everybody.